Well, there you have it. Welcome to the Inwits with the single solitary Inwit. Robin here to wrap up Australian Survivor Brains vs Brawn. I have my celebratory Scotch and Dry. Delicious. Ready for a great little wrap up. I am still pretty wrapped about that final two. Obviously, we had a great final three. And God, I would never have been able to call the final two of George and Hayley. That blows my mind that even occurred. The self-proclaimed king and queen of Brains vs. Brains vs. Brawn. What two powerhouses that aren't aligned can come together and be in a final two like this is. I feel like we've been pretty lucky in the grand scheme of things. Anyway, what I might talk about today is I'll just kind of wrap things up and then talk about what I liked about the whole season overall and what was kind of lacking, and maybe with a little bit of a chat about what's to come in February of 2022. Anyway, so I was watching a lot of stuff. Not a lot of stuff. I don't watch a lot of stuff. I'm watching a couple of things on Instagram where all the jury contestants were saying who's going to win the individual immunity challenge leading into final two, and they all said Flick. Strange. I find that really, really strange that they all thought Flick would beat Hayley. Hayley has clearly proven herself an absolute monster when it comes to the endurance challenges. So for everyone to assume it would be Flick that would win was crazy, but maybe that goes to show that the jury did have strong, soft feelings towards Flick. Really enjoyed her, which means her social game's pretty strong, and she does pose a great threat in the grand scheme of things. Much better than a Way and a Cara, who I don't think were very threatening at all in the final five, and they would have been your typical goat. So anyway, Hayley walks away with hobbles away. Another grueling challenge. It looked like a brutal torture device from medieval times, but cool. Loved it. Loved that it was a bit different. It's another epic 5.5 hour challenge that we have for the final two immunity. And Hayley takes it out. And in my mind, I was like, Hayley should by far take Flick, because Flick's strategic game wasn't there compared to a George. George was guns blazing since day dot. He played hard, he played aggressive, and he also played a brilliant strategic game. He played a brilliant strategic game while not thinking about the social element. I have been reading some comments online on Facebook and Instagram, and also a couple of comments, or a comment on the Inwit's channel, that people aren't too happy about a bitter jury, because George played so well that the jury shouldn't have been angry at him. That's the game. I think George feels, unfortunately, when it came to that final tribal, obviously for those who just watch this, a bit of a quick recap. Hayley wins immunity. She, instead of taking Flick, decides the safest bet is to take George. In the end, she wins, 7-2 or 5-2? I don't know how many are on the jury, but quite a lot, I guess. So maybe she wins. George only gets 2 votes. Hayley gets the rest. So a pretty commanding win. And I would have taken Flick. I probably would have lost if I was playing that game, because this is the one element that, being a viewer and not being there for 48 days, you miss. You miss the connections, and so and the emotional bonds that tie people together, the friendships that are formed over 48 days, and through any strange little acting gig that I do, if I have an acting gig that goes for a certain amount of time, you always end up in this weird bubble, and you might be shooting for 3 weeks, and in that 3 weeks you become the closest of friends. You probably won't see each other after that ever again, but in that time you're really, really tight. So similar sort of things with Survivor. You're out there in the wilderness experiencing something together, creating this TV show together, but also experiencing the hardships of sleeping on the ground, the cold, the hunger, the physical challenges, and all that sort of stuff. So what we as viewers don't see and don't feel is the knife in the back when you get voted out, or blindsided, which we'll talk about in a second. So I would have taken Flick because of that reason, because from what I saw, George's strategic game was just beautiful. But what we have here is the big problem of it's upset a lot of people. So George becomes, without being a villain, I don't think George is, I mean, he's going to be typecast as a villain, but he's not the villain as, because he's fallen in the same category as Russell Hantz. Russell Hantz, back-to-back, makes it to the final tribal twice, one after the other, and plays a beautiful strategic game, but hurts and annoys and upsets everybody else, and they don't want him to take away the money. And this in essence is what we kind of have here with George. But could George have done any better? We do have the 3 pillars, and this is what Hayley goes into and sums it up sums it up really nicely, which is why I really wanted Hayley to win. She plays a very strong all-rounder game. Being a fan, as by the sounds of it, she's a fan as long as I've been a fan. She had a great strategic game, second only to George. However, her social game, even though you could argue her social game wasn't great because it got her voted out, that was a strategic mishap that got her voted out, an oversight of what could have happened. It wasn't social. That's not why she was voted out. She built bonds, and the bonds she built were a social bond, which is why Flick and Danny always wanted to go to her and try to swing her across. So she had a great social game, and even though I have been a little bit disheartened about Flick's strategic game going into the second half, not Flick, Hayley's strategic game going into the second half of the show, post-merge, she did start to bring out the physicality. Once Emmett was gone, and even with Emmett, she was challenging against Emmett, she did become this season's challenge beast. Another term that's used loosely in Australian Survivor. So she encompasses everything that would be Survivor. She has a very strong strategic pillar and a super strong physical pillar and a great social pillar. So all 3 pillars she's got covered. Whereas George only had the 1 pillar, and it was a very, very strong pillar. The strategic side was beautiful. Loved a lot of what he did. Loved a lot of it. But the balancing act of juggling the jury comes into play. And people have been commenting on Facebook and stuff that this is why the game should have the people vote, like us, the viewers, vote for the winner. And someone said they won't watch Survivor again until they change. I'm like, well, I would be the exact opposite. If you had us vote for the winner and not the jury, I don't think it would make Survivor anymore. The whole essence of, and the beauty of this game is you have to vote people out, but you have to vote them out in a way that they don't know you're going to vote them out, so they don't get wind and vote you out. So you've got to best them before they get you, but you have to do it in a way that means they're not going to be pissed off with you, or they're going to respect you and admire what you did in order to vote you the winner. So it's this really beautiful, delicate balance of being a complete asshole or doing it with some sort of tact, or doing it a bit more subtly and owning up to it later. And unfortunately for George, he was very aggressive with his strategy. He was very out there. He was very, this is my way or the highway sort of approach. And we see that when Kara tried to settle him down and said, we want Wei to feel like she's one of us. Please let Wei have some control. And he just kept saying it's got to be this way until Kara said, hang on a second, please, Wei, what do you want? So if you're going to play such an aggressive game, you need to understand the social dynamics of what that's going, the social implications of what that's going to have later on down the track if you get to the final two. And this is where George stuffs up. George could have won this game. It would have been hard. Like I said, I've been back in Hayley right from the get-go. I think she's been such a great player, such an amazing player for Australian Survivor. But George was George, and that political background really screwed him over in that final tribal. When you have 2 seasons where Shan gets to the final tribal, and twice she becomes the lawyer at the final tribal and loses twice. The lawyer, the politician, these sort of roles have their place and can help you progress in the game. But when it comes to that final tribal, you need to become a human. You need to show some empathy. You need to understand that the tribe, or now the jury, is hurting because they're not there. And it's a lot of money. Yes, it's not the million in American Survivor, but $500,000 is nothing to sneeze at. God, I'd be killing for that. No, I would not be killing for that. But, you know, it's a lot of money. And people get so close. And it's not, I mean, the US Survivor's going out in 26 days. This is 48 days. You're putting everything on the line for a long period of time. You're giving up 2 months, 3 months of your life to try and win this. So understanding that there are going to be some bitter jury members, and I understand, I hear people commenting about, oh, they were just bitter. If you look at the history of Survivor, if you look at the history of the American Survivor, bitter juries have been a thing for a very long time. This is why Russell Hantz did not win in season 19. Partly also why he didn't win in season 20. Bitter juries. He played amazing games. In season 20, it's a bit different. He's up against Sandra and Parvati, 2 amazing players. But in season 19, he should have won. But a bitter jury means he doesn't win. So that's 10 years in American Survivor. We still have bitter juries, and we only have just started to change the idea of a jury actually respecting game plan in the American Survivor as of recent. Australian Survivor is still in its infancy, and Australian Survivor still has a lot of players. I could be very wrong here. This is my opinion and what I see. It's a lot of players who, I mean, Andrew for one, had never seen an episode of Survivor, and he had plenty of time to watch because there were delays in filming because of lockdown. He'd never seen an episode of Survivor, any Survivor, not even Australian Survivor. Some contestants have only ever watched Australian Survivor. I mean, a Luke Toki, who is one of our best players, our most popular players, before he played, he just watched a highlight reel and started implementing everything that Tony did, which is why we got the Spy Shack. So Australian Survivor is still in its infancy, and it has people who think they understand the game, but they don't. But don't get me wrong, they've played the game. They're closer than I have ever been to it, but they don't come with 20 plus years of understanding the game like a Hayley does. That's why you have a bit of jury. That's why you have a Danny have a go at Hayley and say in her little comment while you're talking about lying and deceiving and regrets, what about voting me out? Do you regret that? What about you lied to us? That's someone who doesn't understand. And Hayley answered that with perfection, saying, yeah, this is the game. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I've been here, I've watched so much Survivor, I've been watching it for 20 odd years. I know this is part of the game and it's important to get myself further. But we have a jury that is still an Australian Survivor. It's still in its infancy. So a jury that is going to be bitter. And if you're not going to understand and use your social abilities to calm the upset jury, to make them feel like they are important, that if I didn't make that move when I made that move, I was next to go. You were coming after me, and it was a self-defense. You were a great player, and I had to take you out. You end up just coming off as an arrogant prick. And unfortunately, George didn't let go of the politician element. And even when someone asks him a question, thank you for that question. That is a great question. I will answer that. Nobody likes politicians. There's so much hatred towards politicians. That's not going to get the people on your side. That's not going to give them a reason to vote for you. So in a series of Brains versus Brawn, where the 4 Brawn remaining members and some of the Brains want someone who can compete physically and are looking at that overall all-rounder player, which you don't need to be an all-rounder player to win. You definitely don't. It helps, and that's Hayley was amazing as probably the best all-rounder Australia's seen for a long time. But you can be a strategic genius like George and still take out the win if you can understand the social element, because social's probably the most important pillar that a lot of people forget about. Strategic, yes, you need to be able to play big, you need to be able to make the moves, you need to have the resume. Or physical, you need to be able to prove yourself as that can become a negative if you don't win immunities, you end up going home, but you've got to prove yourself as a physical challenge, a physical threat. But it's a social game that really, really ties it all together. And George really lacked that. He tried, and he did these really, like when he carried Wei, that was really great. But he's already upset Wei. Wei's already told him he upsets people. People don't like him because he's mean. He's missing a lot of these moments. So what George needed to do is, yes, own his game, but also come at it from a little bit of empathy. Do you regret anything? You can say yes. Why do you have to stop lying here? If you don't regret it, great, but you know that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that you hurt them. They want to hear that you probably crossed a line, but it was necessary. They want to hear something. I don't know what it is in the moment, but George stopped the lying. Aside from the political mask he wore, George stopped the lying and the manipulation that he'd been doing so well to own his game. But in turn, it really pissed off most of the other people. And I'm a bit upset we didn't get to see everybody's comment. We only saw a handful, which is really, really annoying, because that final tribal is so interesting. And to make sure you hear from everyone's little question. And unlike American Survivor, we're back at this is how I love Final Tribal with the jury gets to ask them a question each. Whereas now American Survivor is a bit more fluid. It lacks a bit of that punch, and some of these questions can be great, some of them can be funny, some of them can be just stupid. But it does provoke some great conversation back and forth and some great answers. And George didn't give any good answers. George did what he did when Hayley got voted out. When I was watching George and going, why would they even believe what George is saying? Maybe it was because Hayley was a bigger threat. Hayley was a more dangerous player because she was more secretive, she was more subtle. Whereas George, you know what George is going to do. And George is going to say this stuff, and we can understand. Better the devil you know. But George came at this final tribal with the same approach, which was hideous. He really ruined everything. He ruined any chance he got. He was always going to get Kara's vote. I was actually pretty surprised that he got Laura's vote, but I think it was because he saved Laura. No, he was the reason Laura was saved. Even though it was Hayley that saved Laura, George's information, little secret covert ops operation that he was running was the reason Laura stayed. Maybe that's why Laura made the vote for him. But aside from that, he really let himself down. Final Tribal is a potential to put out the fires that you've caused. And he burnt a lot of bridges. He set fires up all over the place. And it's yes, you've got to own that. I'm not saying don't own that, but you have to understand that you still are working with people who have been upset and potentially frustrated about your game style, don't understand your game style. You need to make them understand. You need to understand, George, from day one, was public enemy. Everyone wanted George out of here. Emmett even says, George, the cockroach from Bankstown, everyone couldn't kill him. Now he's here at the very end. That's a huge point to prove. Everybody wanted me gone. I was on the chopping block from day one. I had to do this to make sure I wasn't on the chopping block. Had to do this. Yeah, you don't like me for it. But how do you think I felt? I was the one excluded. You all didn't like me. So what was I to do? You can still not like me. But have a think about how that makes me feel and how I had to play. Don't be angry because I played this way. I was forced to play this way because no one accepted me. Make the jury think a little bit. Give them something else that isn't just your awesome strategy, because now you're just playing one note. You haven't done anything else. And unfortunately, George only played one note in Final Tribal, and Hayley ends up winning, which, great. I wanted her to win. Like I said when I started doing the Inwits videos again, the first one I think I said we've got the king and the queen, but I'd much prefer to have a king on the chessboard, a queen on the chessboard, even though the king needs to be there. The queen is much more powerful. And we saw that. We saw that very much so. But anyway, she wins. It's great. I'm a big fan of this final two. I thought it was a great final two. I was a little disappointed at George's speech, and I knew that's what I was going to get from him anyway. But loved it. Now just wrapping up this whole season. Brains versus Brawn. We split the teams up in the Brainy tribes and the Brawny tribe. But that's about as far as this theme went. I mean, Danny mentions she was a challenge beast. This bothers me because Danny wasn't a challenge beast. Danny was a competitive challenger. Not a challenge beast, a competitive challenger. There is a big difference. Much like there is a big difference between a blindside and an Australian blindside. But Danny's saying, oh, I wanted the challenge beast. I was the challenge beast. Well, you know what? You're only competitive in challenges because, unfortunately, every challenge favoured the Brawns. You can go back to the very first challenge that was teed up for Brains versus Brawn in the very first matchup. You had two options. This is as far as the theme went. You could do a puzzle, a slide puzzle, or you could chop through a log. And on the Brawn tribe, they had a professional wood chopper. And on the Brain tribe, they just had smart people. Now this puzzle, this slide puzzle here, if you have someone like, what's his name? Christian. If you have Christian from David vs. Goliath, Christian makes slide puzzles for a living. Now we've got a fair challenge. Just because it's a puzzle doesn't mean it's aimed for the brains. It was completely disadvantaged. The disadvantage was to the brains there, where you have a person who chops wood competitively for a living, and the first leg of this thing is chop some wood, chop a log in half, and no one makes puzzles. No one does slide puzzles for fun. They're just smart people. And this carries on. That's the only time we see this stuff. But when you get to merge, when it becomes individual immunity, where is the challenge that is purely for the brains? There was none. Not a single one. Any element, and the one that Wei did win, she won the puzzle, great. And you can have a go at me and say, but there were puzzles. Yes, there were puzzles. But the puzzles involved getting through a grueling physical challenge first. Which, yes, the puzzle is the great equalizer. But if Wei, who's probably the best at the puzzles, can't get through, she didn't do two of the challenges because she just couldn't complete them. She sat out of one, said, I'm not even going to try. It's too much for me. Where's the fairness in this? Where's the separation? You've given the theme, brains versus brawn. Don't just sugarcoat it. Make it the season. Have one challenge that's full for the brawn. Have a challenge that's for the brain. Mix it up. A challenge that is purely puzzle. That's a purely mental puzzle that doesn't need you to swim out, pull yourself across a raft, and look at the pictures of the animals and swim back and pull yourself across and run across the thing to get to the... No. Give us something that is completely, purely puzzle to balance it out. You can't theme a season, brains versus brawn, and completely disregard the brains as far as the immunity challenges goes. It really frustrates me. I mean, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I love Survivor and I'm never going to not stop watching it unless the viewers vote for the winner, because that's not on. It makes no sense. That's not Survivor in the slightest. But that was, you know, you had an option, you had an opportunity. And you missed it. You missed this opportunity to do something really cool, to really go along with the theme. And this theming of Survivor, I mean, I feel like moving forward, we see our Australian Survivor next Feb, which is great. It looks like they are going to stick to their promise. I know COVID kind of really interrupted, but there was talk about trying to do 2 seasons a year. If we're lucky, we'll see one in Feb and we'll see one August, September. I'm hoping for it anyway. That would be amazing for me. Twice the opportunities to try and get on this show. But we have the preview for what's to come, and rumor is a very strong rumor, and it's pretty clear with that the trailer. It's blood versus water. So it's another theme. How do I feel about this theme? I love blood versus water. Blood versus water has been done twice, off memory, in the American season. One with completely returnees. The first blood versus water was with returnees, which made sense. And then the second one was completely new players. Again, I think that's the one Tyson won. Might have been Tyson's first season. I don't know. They might have done 3 of them. I can't really remember. I got to brush up on my Survivor history. But now we're going into blood versus water. And now rumours are circulating. You read on Instagram and see some of the old Survivor contestants making a couple of comments. It looks like we're going to get returnees again. And it's going to be a half. It's going to be half returnees and half new players. But it's a blood versus water theme, and this is something that kind of bothers me a little. I'm going to love it. Like, I know there's going to be flaws. There's going to be stuff I can pick apart about this season of Survivor, but at the end of the day, I loved it, and I was wrapped with the final 2. Yeah, there was some dud competitors. There's always going to be some duds, and unfortunately, we still struggle with just trying to let a bunch of great players play the game. We always want to fill it with ex-football players or sports stars of some description, or I mean, there's always a model floating around, but there's always a model of some description in American Survivor anyway, so that's not really I get it. There's always people they've hunted down, but the celebrities, the Instagram followers, some of these people who are just doing it for the quick cash grab, where there's some real hardcore fans out there, myself included, that would love to play the game, and we're now forced in this weird situation of constant themes. And if you don't fit the theme, or if you don't know what the theme is, you can't really sell yourself towards that theme. But then you add the themes and then the returnees. I'm really looking for a fans versus favourites season, to be honest with you. But how can you have a fans versus favourites season when we're theoretically doing fans versus favourites? We've done it multiple times. You know, the champions versus contenders. I mean, Luke Toki's been there twice and he comes in as a favourite. Dave's done it twice. Like, I think we need to get a larger pool of contestants before we keep bringing in returnees. If we're doing blood versus water, we should have all returnees or all new. Because now the theme becomes this weird blood versus water, but now it's also fans versus favourites. And the fans coming into blood versus water, they have their existing blood relationship, their friend, their family member, their partner, their son, their daughter, their dad, mum, grandpa, grandma, whatever connection they have. So they've got their one pair. But then you bring in the favourites coming in. If they're coming in with a loved one, but they're also coming in as friends because they may have played season 2 and season 3, and then they played together on All Stars. And you know, the Australian Survivor alumni is still kind of small because we keep reusing a lot of our players very quickly and very early on. That they're always hanging out. I mean, if you see them on their Instagrams, they're always connecting with each other. They're always, whenever one's in another state, obviously it's a bit different with COVID, but if they did a finale, they're all there. They're all invited together. So there's friendships there. There's established friendships. And if those established friendships come in with a family member, they now have a block of 4 compared to the favourite or the fans coming in with their loved one with only a block of 2. And obviously the teams are switched. So it really puts the new players, who I'm just currently calling the fans, but it puts the new players at a massive disadvantage because you're mixing returnees with family members or with loved ones and favourites and new players. The mix just doesn't work. And I get why they're trying to do the theme. I get the hype behind it. I know they really wanted another champions versus contenders, and to be honest, Brains versus Brawns was pretty much another champions versus contenders. It was a bunch of muscle-clad people versus people who weren't really muscly. However, on Brains, we had an ex-Tour de France cyclist. That's Brawn. That's Brawn every day of the week, you know? So we still want to do these themes. And the themes, I mean, the themes are good. And I don't remember any of my favourite Survivors purely on the themes. The Rob Has a Podcast thing is counting down every single season of Survivor. And the only big, Heroes vs. Villains was a great theme. Loved it. Really, really loved Heroes vs. Villains. And I'm going to assume they're going to try and squeeze in a Heroes vs. Villains soon. But we haven't got a big enough pool to draw from. We don't. Heroes vs. Villains was season 20. The show had been running twice a year for 10 years. You've got stacks of people, 24, 20 contestants, whatever the number was. You've got stacks of people to play from. Yeah, there was returnees scattered throughout that. But you had so many more. I mean, the first, season 8 in American Survivor was the All-Stars season. It was the first time they did returnees. So that's 4 years in. We did returnees in our 3rd season, didn't we? Or at least definitely the 4th season. No, definitely the 4th season, I think. But we had returnees straight away. We had All-Stars at season 5. I think we need to branch out. I think we need to get a bigger pool of people to stop. And then we're going to love these returnees more. Yes, do I want to see Dave play again, Luke play again, Jericho play again, Shawnee play again, Hayley play again, George play again, even Danny. There's so many players I want to see play again. Quite a lot, actually. But you can't, you just keep playing them they're alternating seasons. Give us time to build more, establish a bigger pool, so then we can really flesh out these themes. Then we can actually do blood versus water with all returnees or all new players, rather than mixing it up and giving it a big disadvantage to the new players coming into the season. It's just one of those things. And if you look at Survivor now, Survivor Season 41, coming out in a couple of weeks' time, they've ditched the themes because the themes don't make the game. Unless you're really going to theme it. Survivor Pearl Islands, the pirate one with Rupert, one of my favourite seasons of all time. that was fun, and it really themed the pirate element to it. We really, but it didn't change the way the game was played. Brains vs. Brawn, a great theme. White color, blue color, great theme. Heroes, healers, hustlers. There's so many great themes that they've done. But you need to look a little bit deeper, I think, as far as casting and goes. And I'd like to see a couple of changes. I'd like to see a couple of more fresh faces. I'd like to see us rely less on the theme and more on the players and the gameplay and the strategy behind everything, the interactions between players. I think that would help Survivor going forward. I feel the themes run dry really quickly. I mean, we did have Redemption Rock appear. Does that mean we're going to do a full season of Redemption Island, Redemption Rock, wherever we're shooting, like America did? You know, when are we going to do Champions versus Contenders again? Because I know they wanted the 3 series of that. Fans versus Favorites, Fans versus Favorites 1, Fans versus Favorite 2. They're going to do it. But if you held back a little, Season 2 was one of the best seasons we've done. Still no theme there. And then we started to add the themes. Bit too early, and now it's hard. They've kind of put themselves in a hole where it's hard to not have a theme. They kind of got to go bigger and better, and it's all about the theme. The next one's about the theme, where it's not about the gameplay. And when it's not about the gameplay, you do end up with a larger amount of dull cast members. Like, who even remembers what Gavin Wanganeen did? Why was he there? Why was he there in this season? Just because he was an ex-footballer, just because he was a name. And he fitted the category of brawn and a well-known personality that people are going to understand. We don't need that. We need people who are going to make a mark. We don't, like, people get the purple edit. You know, in Australian Survivor, half the cast get a purple edit. You know, they're so easily forgotten. Anyway, that's a little side rant. I'll wrap it up there. Cheers to Hayley. Well done. I'll be back later this week to do my little wrap up of Survivor South Africa. I keep saying South Australia. Survivor South Africa Immunity Island. And then, do I do a bit of a pre-show before Survivor S41? Maybe. Do I do it with Jack again? Maybe. Do I do it on my own? Most likely. More probable that I'll be here by myself. Otherwise, if I don't do a pre-show before Survivor Season 41, my first show back will be Survivor 41. All right, after South Africa. Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for commenting, like, subscribe, do all the fun bits and bobs. I will comment back in the downtime. Hope you also enjoyed the season as much as I did. See you guys.